opened his mouth. Believe he has people. Upper. Understood. He kept the dead. He cannot flourish in substress. Heatness left now. Now. Has no heat genius. Has no heat genius. So well known. 7. And has no heat genius. So well known. So well known. Believe an attribute. Believe in our sagacity. In our sagacity has no heat genius. He let out.
However, there is one mount which is more important than all the others. Look at your thumb. You will notice that it seems to have just 2 sections, while your fingers have 3. Present lost, 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 good sign in your hand, which is more important. Line, heavily brain. Picture. However, there. I prefer. You have this line. Look, notice. Heavily brain. 4 seconds. Will notice. Picture. I prefer. Finger, which no or whether or not lines in the more physical grade known as the to make and to the middle used thumb and a short thumb. Look, notice your hand. Same name for some out of the hand. For some finger, which this line really is to read you and understand. You have 2 or 3 mounts on your hand. That's a good sign.
I saw this footage of the BBC London City riots from a few years ago and captured the footage, edited it down to show this natural glitch that was happening through the feed. And from that, I saw that it had a similarity to my layered vinyl compositions and decided to bring the two together and make an interactive installation. And technically what I'm doing is I'm making a natural glitch. It's the most physical glitch you can find in an old technology like vinyl. And so what's happening is as the needle is trying to read the vinyl, because there's so many little layers from these broken pieces of records, it actually starts to jump around, similar to what the people are doing in the video.
Cool. Cool. Hello, everyone. Hello, Maria. Let me introduce you to our class real quick, our virtual class we got going here. So everyone, welcome to Professor Alper's online class. You know the deal, live and direct from Puerto Rico. Today, I'm really, really happy we have a guest artist who we wouldn't have necessarily been able to get in person in the time that we had for this semester. So we're really excited to make the best of this quarantine situation. And I would love to introduce to you the amazing composer, abstract turntablist, traditional DJ, and sound artist, Maria Chavez. Yay! Now, for those of you who don't know, which I'm assuming will be most of these students, just giving a little intro to you and then we'll get right into it. So, Maria, you were born in Lima, Peru, see? And you moved to Texas at what age?
At 2.
2. Oh, okay, fresh.
Yeah, little nugget.
A little one. And you moved to Austin first or Houston?
Austin, then Houston.
Austin, then Houston. 2 of the much cooler parts of Texas, if I do say so myself. I like Houston more than Austin, to be honest with you.
Me too. It's not as cheap. But you have to know where the cool stuff is to know.
Yeah. I think just with hip-hop history alone makes it, one of the staples, which we can get right into. Maybe that has something to do with the beginnings of your story.
I'm happy to talk about DJ Screw any day.
Man, that's right. Oh, I totally forgot. That's his town.
I grew up at the height of that when I was like 7 to when I was 13. That was really all that was playing on the radio besides pop music, because they had a monopoly down there.
Jeez.
They had their own label. the radio stations wanted to play them. They were selling all the time. They were millionaires before the other larger labels in the West and East Coast.
Wow.
They didn't realize how much money they were making until they got in the 2000s.
There's an episode of a Netflix documentary series called Hip Hop Evolution.
Oh yeah, how is that? I haven't watched it yet.
It's pretty good. You know, it's very historically accurate, and they have an entire Houston episode.
Great. Oh, I should
So
watch that.
for all of my students out there who don't know about DJ Screw, they probably heard the term chopped and screwed before, but they might not know who DJ Screw is. I recommend everyone to go and check out that series because I don't want to, we could spend hours talking about old, like 90s, weird 90s, like DJ hip hop ideas from Texas.
I mean, it's a sampling,
Yeah,
class. So,
it's true. It's true.
So, I mean, you could start with Jay Dilla and go into that, but
True.
we'll stay on course, and then
Yeah.
I'll bring it back around. I'll loop it back in.
So we'll rein it back in because it is related. So let's say, so in your teens, you're in Houston by that point, right? In your teens, you're in Houston. So you were 16 when you first got into DJing in the more traditional sense, if I'm right.
Yeah.
So
In the 90s, so it was just vinyl.
oh, cool.
There was no CDJs yet at all.
Mm-hmm. So no one's using their laptop. Laptops are not powerful enough for this.
I don't think laptops came about. Well, no, I guess in the 90s, but they weren't used for
Yeah.
kind of processing by any means. It was still on larger computers and
Right.
modules, like Akai modules.
Mm-hmm.
And I was using Cubase at the time. So, but yeah, the digital editing things didn't really seep into my work until I was 18.
Ah, okay.
That was when I was really starting to learn this, but it was all on my own.
Right.
But yeah, the traditional vinyl DJing, when I DJ with CDJs, I only beat match by ear.
Right.
I don't use any of the programs that are in, like the syncing and things.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because that has changed an entire generation of DJing in the sense of like learning it in the ear training side, and not just the ear training to beat match and not just pressing the button.
Not just so that it's it's not just about the beat matching.
Right.
It's about pulling it in. It's about making sure that they're in the same tune or in the same key.
Right. Right.
Like similar storyline or I definitely think that there is a separation. So all of the people that they're mainly trans or women, I insist that they learn beat matching by ear first.
Right. Absolutely.
Then they don't have to be, if they're touring the world and they get a set of CDJs that don't have Reactor on or whatever on it, they can still play.
Right.
And be at the mercy of these machines, because it's all about being self-sufficient, so that as soon as they take away everything they possibly can, you can still do the work and it'll still be good.
So that's how you got your start. That was the learning it the analog vinyl way.
Yeah.
And also learning the basic. What'd you say?
Watching Armand Van Helden live. And
nice.
I don't know if you guys know, this might be too old for you guys. Bad Boy Bill. He was huge back in the 90s in the South. He was from Chicago, breakbeat guy, and house too, but Chicago house. And then always hearing about Francois K and everybody
in New York, right?
So just learning about all of these different genres of music, but it was all through vinyl DJing.
Through the vinyl DJ culture, right. But also, like you said, learning, and you're right, but teaching yourself, right, and teaching yourself some of the basics of the digital production when you're 18, you said, with Cubase, which is, for the students, another DAW that still exists. A lot of people use it.
It's very similar to Reaper.
Right.
And I think that's why I like Reaper so much now, because it has a similar choreography,
Right.
keyboard choreography
Right.
when it comes to the basic editing things. So I highly recommend anyone getting into audio, just have Reaper. It's free.
Yeah.
Donate what you can. Just have it on your laptop.
Yep.
I just use it to. I'm always editing something now. Like
Right.
it's for fun.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
and you'll be surprised. A lot of recording studios I've found, like when I went to EMS in Stockholm, their residency up there. They were all talking about Pro Tools, and I had to pull the guy aside. I'm like, I'm sorry, I mean, I get Pro Tools and I love it, but I know what I need, and I just need Reaper. And he like, looked, like, all of the studios have Reaper, but nobody knows.
Don't tell. This is for me, you, and our students. That's amazing, because I tell my students to be what I say, agnostic with your DAW, in the sense that you should be able to move around and not have one true God in the software sense.
Absolutely.
But obviously the nonprofit, obviously people have Pro Tools because they say it's the industry standard, but now we're hearing the industry is shifting to the homes and in the audio world compared to 20 years ago. So things are shifting, and I'm glad that you recommend Reaper to my students as well, because now it's not just me telling them.
Yeah, I think if you want to become a professional engineer outside of your local area, it would behoove you to just have it and just get it as part of your language now.
Amazing. Awesome. So back on to the timeline here. You, around 20 years old, you said you had a bit of a falling out with the more traditional club scene that you started out with, and that pushed you into a more experimental direction. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's one of those stories where everyone is telling you that what you're doing is wrong, but you feel like something about what they're telling you is wrong.
Right.
And I think my biggest lesson from that moment onwards was showing me when life is telling you on all angles that what you're doing is wrong, you have to break through that, because had I listened to them, I don't know where I would be right now.
Right.
Because I accepted their dismissal of me and them pushing me out and rejecting my curiosity ultimately, all it did was really just push me in the direction I was meant to go in, and where it was meant to go, where it could actually cultivate itself.
Right.
And because of that, now I have an entire career based on it, and I don't even know where any of those dudes are anymore.
Right. Exactly.
Even when I go back to Houston, I think there's one guy, I think he still plays, but I really don't know. And I'm not to like, you know, be bitter or anything, but I
Right.
think it sets that for, when society is trying to force. I mean, I think right now is a really great example of that too, especially for your students. Just to being a student in this era must be so scary.
Right. Yeah, it is, definitely.
And not knowing, like, I mean, ultimately, what I've been talking with all of my colleagues lately is like the rave is illegal.
Hmm.
It's not illegal because of drugs or any of that. It's illegal because it's dangerous for our society, literally.
Yeah.
So like it's like the time of the rave is over.
Yeah.
This is the end of an era.
Yeah.
So where do all of these jobs, how do they evolve?
Hmm.
And so now is the time to look at your old dreams and readjust them to a new time and adapt, and see how your talents can adapt to this new time, and then let that evolve. Because if you just stick with what you were expecting yourself to do, like what these boys were telling me,
Right.
then you don't have that chance to adapt, and you might be left behind.
Right.
And you know, you can't really catch up once you've been left behind, especially in audio engineering culture, because technology is just moving
Yeah.
at such a pace. And now that we're all going to be live feeding, the next objects that are going to be coming out are going to be all about the best audio for your laptop, and
Yep.
this phone has the best speakers in it. And, you know, it's like, it's all of these different adjustments to a new world. And so instead of trying to enforce one way of thinking, I want to be the best live audio engineer, but like, there might not be jobs for live audio engineers for a really long time. So how are you going to adjust all of your talents from being a live audio engineer and adapt them to a new time? And I think that's what I did. I got pushed out and I was like, nobody likes this. I don't get what I'm doing wrong here. I just want to, I just think this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I learned that there were concerts in art galleries, and that idea just blew my mind. I was like, why are there concerts in art galleries, you know?
Right.
And so I wanted to go and see what it looked like. And it was a free jazz show with Joe McPhee and Dominique Duval.
Wow.
It was like, of course, I didn't
Totally.
masters until later.
Yeah.
Every time I think about it now, I just kick myself in the head. It's like, you should have known.
It's like, that's the big deal right there. So tell us about what it was when you were in your early 20s that made the more traditional bros of the club, you know, sneer and push you away from their scene. What was it that you were doing as a DJ that pushed you away from this more traditional world and into the more, like you said, art gallery concerts and things like that? What was it more on the technical side that you were doing?
I was driving them crazy because I was obsessed with the accidental stamped groove at the end of a record that surrounds the sticker label at the center of the record. And that loop is audio-less, technically.
Yeah, audio-less, yeah.
It's technically just a result from the mechanism of the stamp that, so the vinyl comes out as a puck. There are negatives on each side of the, it's now a stamp of the vinyl record, and then it goes into the machine, the puck goes in the middle, and then it smushed it.
Right.
And it takes all the excess out. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah.
And then it comes out, and when it comes out, that smushing part for the center, it has to go like this.
Yeah, it turns, yeah.
And that leaves the sticker on, or yeah, it goes and then it has the sticker, and then that circle, that's actually just a result of the machine.
Yeah, it's just a byproduct of actually just creating a wax disc.
Yeah, like it's just part of the system of making a record. And I just thought there was something really beautiful to the emptiness of it. And you know, now with time, whenever I think about it now, it was also an audio cue for society. It was used in movies as, like, if you, in a black and white movie, if you're walking into a room and the record's still playing, but it's just the ends of the record, you know something's gone wrong.
Right.
Because no one
flipped it, yeah.
You know, or if you hear it, you know that it means the record's finished. It's time to flip it.
Right.
So it's serving as a sampling cue for society to know this is done now. But that's also industry teaching us, telling us what this sound is for.
Yeah, it's only meant as that indicator. It's not
because it was an accident.
Yes.
And he knit it down, so then they needed to give it an excuse, you know. I mean, I'm over romanticizing that part, but I like to think of it that way. Like, oops, we made a mistake. Let's call it this. You know?
No, it's absolutely true. So I love to do for my students is describing sounds with my mouth. Most of my students will probably already know what we're talking about with these locked grooves at the end of a turntable, but you know, we're talking about the click.
And they're all uniquely different.
Exactly. I was going to say exactly that, is that we could hear rhythm we were just talking about looping now. We're just introducing looping to the class, and this idea that you can find rhythm in any repetition, you
Well,
know?
motor, I mean, if you
Yeah.
have a motor, that's the thing about turntable art that really drives me crazy. Some people mistake turntable art and kinetic sculpture
Mm,
because people are just using the rotating motor as the mechanism, but they're not actually using the playbackness of the turntable.
right, right,
That's what makes turntable art. So I think when people assign turntable art, it's always not.
right, right.
And it's that circular motor that I think is the key to everything. It's the spiral.
Mm-hmm.
It's this motion that starts either out and goes in, or in and comes out.
Right.
And I don't mean to get super philosophical here. I'm an atheist. I am very much don't believe in anything mystic. Don't have anything about astrology. Nothing. But I do believe in physics
Mm,
and quantum physics, and
yeah.
I believe in the magic of the spiral. Because there is energy in a spiral, and everything is moving in a spiral. From, if you think about bird's eye view from our universe, no matter where, even if we're standing still on Earth,
Mm.
there is a galaxy moving around in a spiral somewhere around here.
That's very Tesla. That's very Nikolai Tesla.
And then if you break it all the way down to who we are as individuals and how our bodies function, you know, there is this circulation, there's this movement. And I think that's something that I've always been drawn to with the turntable, is how this movement creates a trance, but there's all of these, it's such a fragile state,
Right,
and all of these components that can disrupt it.
right.
And it's meant to be this serene, untouchable object that
Mm-hmm.
society told us, like, DJ boys, why are you messing with the needle like that?
Right.
Supposed to hit the turntable like that, but it makes the needle jump cooler.
Yeah.
Like, look how now you're ruining the record. I don't want my record. You're gonna scratch it. And I'm like,
Right.
but now it has a really cool loop, you know,
Yeah.
like from here to here, and that's really cool. It doesn't sound like that. Well, I don't want it to sound, you know, and
Yeah.
it just butting heads one after another. And it's like, but why?
Right. Right.
And so and me not receiving any kind of support, I retaliated one day, and I played at a club, and I didn't tell anybody. I just told them I was going to play a minimal techno set because that was when Autechre and Sub Rosa and
Yeah.
all of Mila Plateau was really getting big. And so I was, in a way, I was like listening to these ends of these records. I call them Land's Ends. And it sounded, if you had it all the way at 45 plus, all the way pitched
Yeah.
up, it makes a house or a techno beat,
Yeah.
and they can actually beat match them, and they are all a little bit different, you
Yeah.
know. And so that was like, oh my gosh, like, I think I can make a set out of this. And so I brought my records, and my heart was pounding out of my chest.
Yeah.
I knew I was like, people are gonna get mad. But I started, nobody noticed, everything was fine. And then about 10 minutes in, I was like on my 4th or 5th record. And because I was letting him play a little too long, I think.
Yeah.
That was my flaw. Because it was my first time. I was only 18, I think 19 at the time. So if I'm almost 40. So now when I go back in time, I would know how to trick them. So I could, but now I know better. Yeah, by the 4th or 5th record, the person was like, "What are you doing? What is this?" And I was just like, I was like, "Oh God, I gotta
Music.
get out of here. I told you she can't play. I told you she can't play." Even though I've been DJing for years,
Yeah.
she can't play. And then, of course, you know, the boys were like vultures, just like waiting, especially when there was a girl on the bill. Like, they were all just waiting for that one train wreck, because, you know, vinyl, you can train wreck real quick.
Yeah.
We didn't have the syncs like you guys have, so you were really, everybody was watching you. And one train wreck, as a girl, you were kicked off, and it was, I told you she couldn't do it.
Damn.
The first one, so you really had to be on point like
Jeez.
all the time, or else you would lose your spot 3 songs in, 4 songs in because you messed up. And so the boys came in and they got their spot, and I got pushed out, and one guy goes, you're never gonna DJ in Houston again. You know that, right? And I was just like, I don't understand.
Jesus.
I was like, I just thought it was cool.
And little did they know the history that you were tapping into. You were tapping into something, whether you realized it or not, that had been, going on probably since the invention of the modern turntable.
Yeah, the turntable experiment, I believe, was documented in 1915.
Wow.
I think it was a technician, or I don't think it was an artist, but there was, I can't remember where, I have it somewhere. I'll have to look it up again. But I think it was a pitch phase manipulation early on, because back then they didn't have pitch phase. Pitch phase didn't really come into existence until really the 70s, the specific DJ
With the one knob, yeah.
because of hip hop. I mean, hip hop is responsible for so much.
Yeah.
You're talking about playback technology. They're the only reason why playback technology is as advanced as it is.
Yeah.
Because hip hop utilize these machines in a way that the companies actually had to adapt to them.
Right.
And that to me is a powerful culture that
Absolutely.
just has the kind of recognition that it deserves, and we can go into that.
Of course. No, I mean, it goes, it's same with the like with the 808 and the early drum machines and things like that. Hip hop didn't exist when they were invented, and, techno comes later, but, hip hop being the first, by the 90s, it's like all these tech companies are just scrambling to figure out how to appeal to the electronic musician side of it, because the traditional using this and cross fading left to right and don't do anything, just play song right, song left, in the turntable world, that was over.
And classism,
right?
They didn't want to have this equipment, and
right.
This equipment was around, samplers and things like that, but they were in such a large modular, such large machines that you could only really afford it if you were in an institution.
Yeah, totally.
It's not like like Grand Wizard Theater or Grandmaster Flash. It's not like they would have even had access to these machines because of classism and racism, frankly. And because hip hop became such a gigantic money-making culture, then of course the machinery was allowed to adapt and change with.
Of course.
But it had to show the money first, and they're still not enough to be.
No, they're not sharing enough. But you were so initially coming from the more hip hop in the South tradition of DJing, but when you started working in these locked grooves and you started working in the more what the bros in the club would say is is unacceptable, but in other contexts had been going on for quite a long time, like you said, as far early as 1915 with a pitch sweep, but with the hand cranked, exactly. That's fantastic. But so my students, like I had mentioned to you, my students know a little bit now about John Cage from some previous lectures, and he had worked with not only tape but radio, turntables, and a variety of playback devices. But it wasn't until the 1970s that we have someone named Christian Mark Clay, who becomes kind of this composer known specifically for manipulating and experimenting with turntables. And that, tell me if I'm wrong, but from after Christian, it seemed to be this track of artists that have been pushing the analog, rotary style, basically the SL 1200, specifically that one Technics turntable to its absolute extended technique maximum. And you have stumbled upon, when you're 20 years old, this, you've fallen into it, whether you realize it or not. What happens after you leave the club, who do you meet, and how did you start this, formulating the foundations for this path that is now your career?
Well, I was lost. I didn't know what to do. And on Sundays in Houston, 91.7 KTRU, Rice University Radio, I used to be a DJ.
Of course, college radio.
Yeah, I didn't go to school there, but I was a
Local, though.
A local DJ. I did their MK Ultra nights on Friday nights from 9 to 1, and techno, drum and it was like a coveted spot. So I was really working hard. Like, I really wanted to become a well-known DJ, and my next plan was to move to New York then, like to be here. But then when I got pushed out, it was like my entire reality just crumbled. And I was listening to that radio station on Sundays because every Sunday, all day long, they would play this weird stuff, and I would always laugh at it, like, this stuff sounds so goofy.
Yeah.
Like, this. And then one day I was listening to it and I was like, huh. And then they said, here's a show at this gallery. And I was like, huh, maybe I should go to that. And then I went, and I thought it was a little late because they said 8, and I've never been to one before, so I didn't know they'd be a little.
Yeah.
I thought it was even going to be formal. And I got there, and as soon as I went to open the door, someone opened the door for me. And it was this guy, and I looked, and I was like, I'm so sorry, I think I'm late. And I'm like, did I miss anything? He's like, no, we were waiting for you. And and the person that opened the door ended up being my mentor, David Dove, an abstract trombonist, who is the reason why I am an abstract turntablist now, frankly.
Amazing.
I went to the show with Dominique Duval and Joe McPhee. It blew my mind. I was getting my audio engineering degree at the time. I'd also just dropped out of a junior year art history at U of H.
Oh, wow.
And my mom, like right at the end of my junior year, my mom freaked out. And so I was like, look, I'll go to HCC, Houston Community College. I'll do their audio engineering class. It's a 2-year program. I'll do it in a year. She's like,
Right.
I don't care. Finish something, just do something.
Yeah.
Because I was starting to tour. And so I just wasn't focused on school anymore. But with the audio engineering degree, I was like, I need to learn this because clearly I'm into it. So I was getting that degree at the time, and I asked Dave if I could intern at his group that he was hosting the show because I needed an internship for the degree. And he said, the only way that you can intern is if you take this improvisation class that I teach at this place called Mecca. And I was like, well, I'm not a musician, I'm a DJ. And even then, when I was doing these things, I didn't think of it as music or musicianship or art.
Right.
I only thought of it as DJing, And he was like, well, bring a turntable and let's see what happens. And I was just like, one? What do you mean, one? He's like, just bring your setup and let's see. And so I brought one. I brought a stereo with shitty speakers and a little Gemini mixer, and then we had a class, and he improvised with me. He's like, you and me, let's have a duo. And I was just like, okay, like not knowing what to do. And suddenly we had this moment where we closed our eyes and just listened. And then we started. And I didn't know how I knew how to start, but somehow I just knew how to start. And then I had this memory of this like weird out of body experience where I was just watching myself doing all of these things that everyone for like the year before were telling me was wrong. But now I had a different place where it was okay. And so then I was like,
yeah, go buck wild with it.
Yeah. But I guess I was doing it where it was conducive to the improvisation. It wasn't that I was just making noise. I was actually already performing, and I didn't know that that's what that was. And then after that, when the piece was over and I felt it over, and then I just kind of looked up at him, and he looked at me with this big smile. And the group, that it was like 10 kids. Sandy Ewan is part of it, actually.
Amazing.
She was in high school. I was 20 and she was in high school, so she's been since she was 16. But she was there, and my friend Lucas, I went like this, and he looked at me. He goes, "We got her."
Incredible. They did get you. They
They
did
did.
get you.
And
They
I didn't know at the time that Dave's improvisation classes were focused on Pauline Oliveros' deep listening
ah,
and meditation. I didn't realize who she was until I moved to New York in 2005. So the first 5 years that I was working with Dave, I mean, I was doing these improvisation classes like 4 times a week.
right.
Like I just was sold. I was like, this is it. I quit DJing. I gave my DJ company back to the boys. I was just like, I'm done. You guys don't want me around. I found these dudes. I'm out.
Yeah.
And I started going headfirst, learning all about John Cage and all, listening to music or, reading books and everything, just trying to understand what's going on. But I missed that it was Pauline. There was always this white, short-haired kind of old lady hanging around. And she was always really nice.
Yeah.
I didn't really know like what she was there for.
Oh, when you were in Houston at the
Houston.
time, because
Yeah.
she's also from Houston.
Yeah, she's from Houston. So
Oh,
that David Dove actually met her mom. They were working at a call center for the symphony, and they sat together. And he was a trombone player for a really famous ska band called Sprawl. And so then she's like, "Oh, my daughter's a musician." And he's like, "Oh yeah, who's that?" And she's like, "Oh, her name is Pauline." And it's
amazing.
Pauline Oliveros.
Pauline Oliveros.
And I didn't realize it, and we became good friends. And
Yeah.
it didn't really dawn on me until I got to New York, and I was like, oh my God, she's
Oh,
actually,
that's who she is.
yeah.
So, for my students who don't know, we had discussed very briefly in the history of sampling lecture. We had mentioned the West Coast school. We had New York school with John Cage and folks, but on the West Coast, more in the '60s, kind of in relation to the countercultural, hippie movement in the Bay Area. We had the birth of the San Francisco Tape Music Center, which I mentioned to my students because we talked about It's Gonna Rain, Steve Reich, which was, he's not really well known as a tape music guy by today's standards, but he got his start working with those folks at the San Francisco Center. But one of the co-founders of the Tape Music Center was this woman you're talking about, Pauline Oliveros, who is a accordionist by traditional training, and a classically trained composer by traditional training as well. But through her work experimenting with the San Francisco Tape Music Center, she develops this very much influential and long-lasting legacy-creating style of teaching and music listening and performing that she coined called deep listening. And so you talking about your improvisation classes in Houston following her deep listening methods, I'm just catching up my students in what it is you're talking about. And we could talk about deep listening forever, but in the most layman's terms, it's really about, it's not just a performance practice, but it's a lifestyle. It's a philosophy towards living, which is about, nowness, we can say, as well as validity of sounds, not just putting blocks up and saying, well, this is an industrial noise, it doesn't belong in this category of thing. And relating to what you just talked about, you initially doubting, well, I'm a DJ, I'm not a musician, I don't have an instrument, I have a turntable. But a very deep listening approach to that will be like, well, a turntable is 100% an instrument. Right. So it's an inclusive, sort of approach to sound, which is that you should always be listening for the music in wherever you are, because what you might not consider musical, there's music there.
I would also say it's a form of focused listening with the understanding that there is a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is an innate just ability that humans that are able are, as soon as you're born, you're hearing.
Right.
When you turn 2, you're listening. When you're 1, you're listening. And then your listening determines the genre of music you have an affinity towards, and all of these sounds that you have an affinity towards, and all of those sounds that later in your life you are attached to is all cultivated by how you are hearing and listening throughout the early part of your life.
Wow.
And when you have that understanding of your listening path, then it gives you even more ability to listen in your present moment, because then you're adapting your listening to your understanding of how you listen.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you bring that awareness, then you're present.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, it's mindfulness. Everybody talks about mindfulness nowadays, and meditation is obviously very very popular. I would say mindfulness in psychology are becoming more topical and hot topic terms in the non-artistic spheres, in the more mental health world. But taking basically that exact same idea and applying it towards a sound making, music making, and listening, music and sound listening approach is something really unique. And I think it's what made Pauline, beyond her own artistic output as a composer and performer, it puts her in this status of philosopher.
I mean, at the San Francisco Tape Center, while Moog was downstairs showing the guys all of his new modular synth things that he made, Sabatnik was down there. She was upstairs making, what is it, Fly, Fly, Butterfly?
Mm-hmm.
One of the most important electroacoustic sound pieces of our time.
Right.
He was creating electroacoustic sound pieces with microphones in bathtubs with rubber balls to enhance like echo, and she was already creating all of these kinds of plugins before plugins even existed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's examples of these from the 50s onwards.
Yeah.
So in a way, I think she embodies the soul of the center.
Yeah.
While the guys were all just about tools and
Tech.
tools. San Francisco Tape Center, EMS in Stockholm, and then before it was BBC Studio,
Radiophonic.
Radiophonic in London and in France and in Brussels. Like all of these institutions are all responsible for the electronic music we hear now.
Right.
And that's why this tape center is so important in history for people to know, because everything that we hear now in the radio, all of those electronic sounds would have never existed had this tape center not happened.
Yeah, it's not like people were making these things. People were making these things with arts before, and ideas before profit initially. Especially, I would say more the West Coast Don Buchla, in terms of the tools that were being literally invented for these projects were not, they weren't in the most accessible, both in terms of affordability, but also in terms of the sounds that they were creating out of it. But there's oftentimes you have to kind of create the abstract foundations in order for the next generation's more mainstream or accessible artists to be able to take what was initially experimentation and turn it into something you could dance to, or you know what I mean? Or,
yeah. Well, before I get off on it, just so that my very first live turntablism performance was a few months after that first improvisation, and it was in Pauline's mother's piano studio in the house that Pauline lived in.
Wow.
And I didn't even realize that until later as well. And she has this quote that I like to say. I think it really describes her ethos the best. Is everybody improvises their way through every day, and so I do that with music.
True. We definitely
Um,
do.
I see it more. I've taken what she's taught me, and I've taken it to a place where I separate now, where she separates hearing and listening. I separate sound and music, because I'm not interested in musicality for the sake of creating a graph of melody. Like
Right.
I'm interested in sound in the sense that it exists naturally, whether or not we participate in it. It is happening around us because it's a phenomenon.
Right.
And those are the two differences when it comes to what's the difference between music and sound art.
Mm.
Uh, is really music has honed and harnessed sound and graphed it and made it into a language that then you can, manipulate how you want. And then there's the genres of music into new music, and then you get experimental. And then from experimental, you have all of these practices like my abstract turntablism
Right.
that lead into sound art practice.
Right. And I think that talking about, I've been telling this to my kids, but I would say to me, the link between experimental music and sound art and more, visual media practices related to more mainstream, related to film, uh, and related to television and other media would be sound design is kind of this, the link between the two, because what better way to explain, what better way to create an explosion or a spaceship for your film than to, design it from scratch using the same synthesis techniques that were developed by Robert Moog, Don Buchla in the 60s for the sake of making weird music. Even Bob Moog being used, like for Wendy Carlos's Switched on Bach, like that was weird for a lot of people to hear classical music played through a synthesizer,
Without John Bach, we would not have Robert Miles today.
Right, exactly. So let's talk about then what it is that what have you been up to since New York? Because I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but since moving to New York in 2005, like you said, 2005, right? Since moving to New York in 2005, where you still reside, you've followed in this trajectory that has led you to where we are now in 2020. You recently released a record called Plays, which is a live, is a lot consisting of live recordings that have been pieced together of exactly what you were talking about at the beginning, the locked groove performances, right?
That's okay. So
Did the press get it wrong?
they did, and it's my fault because I was still in brain surgery mode where
True.
I'm wavy, so I couldn't get my words right,
True.
and I let it go. And for the students there, just so you know, since February of 2019, I've been on a medical sabbatical because I had to get a really rare brain surgery. It's put my whole life on hold until I can be declared completely cured in February of 2021, because it's mainly a nerve damage issue. It's the location of the nerve damage is what makes it so rare and the most difficult surgery, which is why I went to my guy in Japan.
Right.
It's amazing.
Because American healthcare is so great.
150,000 versus 9,000. I mean, you do the math.
Dang, and here we think Japan is this ultra expensive country. Not when it comes to that.
I get cancer, I'm moving to Japan. No question about it. I know they'll take care of me. Yeah. No,
but anyways,
so yeah, I've been on
yeah.
this school, so yeah, when they were asking for all that press stuff, I think I was in the middle of getting ready to shut everything down. And there's a artist in Berlin, Stefan Goldmann, who started this label Macro, and he's related to I'm not sure if your students will be familiar, but the Berghain zine. tone, that label. He's like in that really German techno scene.
Techno. We'll just say to just in one sentence for the students, it's the most famous techno club and scene, not only in Europe, but we could argue the world.
Yeah, it's the
In-
most
in-
famous club in the world. Yeah,
In the 21st century, yeah.
for sure. So he's related to that, but he's also a composer and experimental musician, and he made this double LP called Ghost Hemiola in 2015-16, and it's just 2 blank records with cut grooves into them. And the idea is he wanted you to take a razor blade to it and slice through the grooves so that when the needle was playing it, it would sound like techno. It would be these electro sounds making these beats.
Cook, 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 cook. Yep.
And then how you cut into it would make, you know, like you can
Make your own patterns.
your own patterns. And so he had been inviting different artists to participate with messing with it, and he asked me to ruin it. He's like, everything else is so beat driven, and I was like, okay, yeah, I don't know if I can do techno like that, but I'll try, because I really wanted to do music. I was and it reminded me of my Land's End series. So I was what kicked me out and evolved into a piece called the Land's End series, where I DJ these ends together, and I still do it just for fun, because it's fun. And so where was I? I lost my train of thought.
So he asked you to do something totally different because you were getting he was getting too many beats.
Yeah, a lot of beats. And so I went in and I got a lot of really cool glitch samples, but I just couldn't. I got like 90 of them, but you know, a glitch sample is only 2 seconds long.
Right.
Even if you have 90 samples, it's only 2 minutes, maybe 3.
Right.
I was, oh my God.
We're talking about literal grains.
Literal seconds of samples, you know. And the thing that you have to think about with the turntable, with the vinyl record, and so that people can see my perspective when I'm in recital mode or performance mode, if you think of like a DAW, like your WAV file, it's a rectangle, right? And then you have your file in there. A vinyl record is the same thing, it's just a circle. That's all it is.
It's spiral.
It's a spiral, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you start to switch your mind to think of the depth of the vinyl record, and you go into it, if you look at the microscopic image of a vinyl record, it looks like canyons.
Yeah.
It looks like topography.
Yeah.
And that has always been a focus of my work. I've had a series called Topography of Sound since 2007, where I'm talking about the subtraction of my practice. I really don't consider myself a musician. I consider myself a sculptor. And what my improvisations with my turntablism practice actually is a sculpture session. But because my sculptural materials, I should say, because what they're subtracting from and being subtracted from is so minute, you can't see it. You can only hear it.
Right, right.
So
You're a microscopic sculpture.
Yeah, so like I'm really there, like
Exactly.
you're just sitting there, and the only way you can ever see the sculpture is by hearing it.
Right, right.
So it's never really intended to emit for you to hear what I want to be emitted. It really is just a random emission from what I'm trying to chisel in, because every record I have is a vocabulary that evolves with time. And every scratch, every little nick, I call it the secret language of time. We'll never really understand or translate this language, but it's electroacoustic language, and to me I find it very haunting and poetic and romantic. And so I have a weird affinity to these very empty sounds, and it has a lot to do with growing up, but I can go to that in a second. So as you start to think about topography, fast forward to I have all of these glitches.
Yeah.
Glitches are, I'm saying the word glitch, but there's no digital, there's nothing
Right.
digital about these sounds, but what a vinyl record scratch is the original digital glitch.
Yeah.
This was the pre-digital glitch.
Right.
And now I have a handful of these electroacoustic glitches
Right.
with nothing to do with them. And I'm so bored with like putting them together and making beats. And I'm just like, oh, I feel like I'm stuck. Like and then I realized in 2018, I had a painting exhibition in the University of Richmond called Topography of Sound. And it was my attempt at creating silent sound installations. A lot of my work in the past 7 years have been focused on installations dealing in sound art, but don't actually focus on sonic emission, because I feel that the art industry wants to co-opt sound art to only be emission.
Right.
And still pushing it into performance practice on a stage or audio engineering.
Right.
And then that's just technical, and it's like, but a speaker is a sculpture too. Like,
Yeah.
you know, every there's aesthetic. And so for me, I feel like in order to push back on what the art industry is trying to push me into, I try to make all of my exhibitions sound less, because I want people to see, oh, a sound artist has a painting show.
Yeah.
And so that's actually the exhibition. I consider myself a conceptual sound artist. I really like to deal with phenomenology and sound in the mind. So in this particular show, the exhibition is actually in your mind, because it's me telling you first you come up to me knowing me as a sound artist, being like, Maria, what's your next show? And I say, oh, Max, it's a painting show of records and needles. And you're like, oh, I didn't know you could paint. And that switches the show. The painting show is secondary.
Right.
The paintings really don't matter. So it doesn't really matter that I can't paint. I mean, the paintings are beautiful, but I'm not a painter, and I certainly don't paint. I wasn't painting regularly before, nor do I paint after. It was really only painting for the show to make a statement that this is still a sound art show, because the imagery is still derived from a playback technology.
Right.
And the imagery was taking microscopic images of vinyl records and needles and repainting them as if they were landscape portraiture paintings. So the way it was making fun of landscape portraiture painting, Hudson Valley from the 1800s, and like, you know, but doing it with modern playback technology, so that a regular person could just walk in and be like, "That's a nice canyon," and walk out, and not feel excluded from the show because they don't know what a record looks like.
Right.
You
It
know?
would be like zooming in. I'm thinking of like a digital equivalent would be like zooming in on a waveform and turning them into oceans, you know, like waves, you know?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's pretty much just adapting the image to watercolor painting. And then the paintings were blown up large. So the largest one was 9 feet by 11 feet.
Wow.
And it's a vinyl, image of a microscopic image of a vinyl record groove, and it looks like a Grand Canyon. And so if you think about sitting in front of that painting, you know it's not a canyon. You know it's actually a vinyl record. It's just blown up really large, like larger than life size.
Yeah.
So when you're standing in front of it, if you could walk into it, you would be the needle. And so then if you start to think about this, as you walk through this, I mean, if you think it's not an audio wave like this where it's 2D flat in the air, it's like this.
Yeah.
You're walking in a
three-dimensional,
as you're going into the center. And that to me is such a gorgeous idea. It's a spiral canyon that you walk through. And so I decided I'll take these electroacoustic glitches and I'm going to stretch them 20 minutes, 60 minutes long, as if I want to take a walk inside of them. And so that's time stretching. So I'm using digital technology. I don't like to, but I am using it when you can actually like just technically manipulate something. I don't like plugins or things like that. So what that album is all of these glitches time stretched 20 to 60 minutes each, and then So it's also not linear. So, because it's
Ah,
not meant to be, it's not music. Remember, I'm not a musician, so I'm not interested in playback technology reflecting a beginning and an end because I don't care about that stuff. To me, this is a non-linear, um, abstract sound piece. That's the only way you can play it back is either through Bandcamp, WAV file, or as a CD.
right.
And you can start at any point. It's
Yeah.
pretty much your adventure. Which canyon do you want to walk through?
So to tell our students today to go onto any of the streaming platforms that you can, it's on all of them, right? It's on Apple Music and it's Spotify.
Yeah.
To go and look up Maria Chavez plays um, and do exactly that. Create your own adventure. Pick, this is doing the thing that you've always been told not to do, which is to just fast forward to your favorite part in a record rather than listening to the whole thing. No, if you have a point that you like, find a canyon that you like to go there. That's fantastic. And
The next phase.
hmm, what's the next phase? VR?
How did you know?
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God! Great minds think alike. I was saying you should.
So great.
You're literally talking about walking through a sound canyon. What better way to do that than to literally visualize that? We have a whole department of VR and emerging technologies at our university.
Great.
I
Well,
and
we develop it. It's supposed to be later this year. There's a VR
fantastic.
facility here in Williamsburg now that just got.
Hmm.
My friend is running it, and so we were just talking about it. It'll definitely take some time, but the real idea is to find a canyon and have solar powered speakers, and it's a hike.
Wow. So that's the
That's
final
that's
phase.
the final phase. Yeah,
That's
I
the
want to
final
work
phase.
with the national park system, and yeah, I
Wow.
really want it.
That's
Yeah.
that's a whole thing. So that's your installation and album recording side. But before we even, and we kind of went all the way, we went ahead to that because I wanted to mention the album, which is obviously more than an album, but you also have a book that you published in 2012, which would be, I guess, a encapsulation for the educational side of things of your technique, which you had been developing since before moving to New York, but up through late 90s through 2012 turntable, what you coin in the book as abstract turntablism technique. I would love for you to break down. You have a book, so they have to get the book, and you're going to be very nice to share some digital documentation with our students. But if you could tell us a little bit about some of the how you recycle records, how in your, because we're talking about sampling this week for students, and this is not your dad's sampling. Um, this ain't your grandma's sampling.
Piece of heart
Um,
sampling.
so could you tell us specifically related to your vinyl, your live vinyl approaches and what you do in terms of capturing, recapturing, and abstracting other people's sounds that have been physically given to you on vinyl?
Well, there's many layers to it, from the social aspect of it to my own philosophies about how I approach the materials themselves. Um, so the solo turntable performance practice itself is recital based. It's one turntable, one DJ mixer. Normally with all three EQs, I need to have low, mids, and highs so that I have some kind of frequency control.
Right.
And I actually, since 2016, have incorporated in my turntable practice a unique needle. It's the only one in its existence in the world.
Ah,
Uh,
wow.
it was invented by Randall Sandin Jr. He's based out of Dallas. He invented them in the early 2000s. It's a double-headed needle.
Wow.
It's needles on one head. They're about a half an inch apart. So when you place them on the turntable and you pull up your faders, you can separate them, channel 1, channel 2, or you
Wow.
can playing at the same time. I like to split them and then split them again 4.1. So I don't know if your students are familiar with the speaker ratios.
Yes, we talked a little bit about going beyond stereo into quadraphonics, and obviously the most popular form that they would know beyond stereo would be like 5.1 Dolby surround sound.
Sure.
But like you said, there are many shapes.
Yeah, there's many shapes and sizes to multi-channel
Yes.
presentation.
Yes.
I've performed for just a regular stereo PA to 140 speaker
Wow.
control with a MIDI controller and my turntable. I actually, a majority of my work deals with large multi-channel speaker installations, which is why I think the installation work tries to go opposite of that.
Right.
People can see, they can see that it's not just one thing, that there's a flow to everything. I feel like when you see all of the work of my career, they all have some kind of something that connects one part to the other. And I feel like as I get older, the puzzle pieces make more sense as they get put together.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I'm still understanding them all. But from this point, I think so I have my double needle in 4.1. That means there's 4 speakers in a room. Normally they're on the 4 corners of whatever space I'm in, and then the audience is in the center. I normally choose to have my subwoofer, which is the one near me, so that I can have control of how much frequency I want emitted from that.
Right.
And then I'll have my needle split 1 and 2, and also some of the techniques that I deal with have a lot of hovering. The needle is hovering over the groove, so it sort of skims the groove. That's like, let's have the students think back again to the topography, the terrain of a vinyl record. You're thinking of canyon, 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 one after the other. It gets into the center, right? So then you're thinking of this needle, this point that is really just meant to oscillate side to side, and that oscillation sends the energy up, and that is what gets transferred into sonic emission that we hear as whatever is being played back. And so if you think of this needle as this kind of oscillating little thing, I always do this little motion when I imagine myself.
I'm a needle.
You can also think of it as almost like it's almost like a little straw that's sucking up the sound.
Boop, boop, boop. Yeah.
Hold your needle in a certain way. The single needle ideally works the best. The double needle is a little bit harder to control. You have to really grab it. She's obese. It's really her problem. But the regular orthophone needle, that's this not the big heavy square shape, but the thinner kind. If you just lightly place it very gently with a lot of care and patience, you can just grab such small snippets that you won't even know what instrumentation it is.
Mm-hmm. It's like you were talking about those grains, those little glitches. Those are when you take something, you take a Britney Spears song, and I give you 0.25 seconds of a Britney Spears song, you won't know what that is.
You'll never know what it is, yeah.
Exactly. So that applies to any record.
But it also applies on the other end too. If there was a piece that I made in 2017 called DOV, and it's actually Prince's When Doves Cry, but it's slowed down 0.000008. So
it's my favorite. That's my favorite Prince song too, and my favorite digital signal processing technique is time stretching. So
I love time. As you can see.
Sounds like the piece for me. My students love time stretching too, because I took my sound of like me clapping my hands and I turned it into like a jet engine through the time stretching. You know what I mean? So
I mean, the turntable is just that. It's just, you do it physically. You can do it with you literally stretch the time. That's what scratching is. You're pulling it back and throwing it back in, or when they're fast, it's just a time stretching back and forth. But it's still that same moment. It's almost as if those rectangle samples is just like one on top of the other, like.
I mean, that's why they call on tape machines and in system softwares, they call the playback buttons the transport because you're transporting in time, you know, you're
Yeah,
that's
you're
all it
moving.
is.
Yeah, exactly. And so with this recital-based performance format, um, I I'm not, like I said before, I'm not really interested in musicality. I think people in music confuse it for music because it's on a rotating motor, and naturally rotating motors loop.
Yeah,
And people naturally assign loops to music.
right.
And loops are just it's just like sound.
Yeah,
Loops just exist. If it's rotating, it's a loop.
yeah,
It doesn't make it music unless you loop it more than once.
right,
So
right.
that's the difference, just like sound. Sound is not music. Sound is a component of music, but music has made into a language. So you can separate these things. And for me, I've been able to consciously separate it so that when I'm improvising, I'm really not trying to create a sound piece that's a beautiful musical moment. It's really more, I'm working with the vocabulary I have. I know the terrain fairly well, but there's always new scratches on them because the records, the vocabularies themselves, they're always sitting together at their sleeves, rubbing together. I don't take care of them. I want the language of time to really, leave its mark so that I'm
Wear and
never,
tear, yeah.
I never want to know what they can, what I always want a moment where I'm like, oops.
Well, we mentioned in my last lecture chance music related to John Cage, so this is very much falling in that. I mean, you're not following the I Ching. Is more the nature in relation to wax, but like you said, you don't know what you're getting, and that's the point.
Well, the wax is the material that's being subtracted from the needle, which is the chisel. And
Ah,
so I think that is the similar. With the I Ching, that was the chant. With me, it's the needle and the
yeah, yeah, very
which is
nice.
why I think my work can be adapted to culture sounds. And the visual cues that you see of my hand movements in relationship to what you're hearing is the sound artistry.
Hmm.
That is the sculptural element, because it's bringing these two things together for you
Yeah,
to realize that there's something here that's coming out.
that's you placing the chisel. That's you actually making the move. Yeah.
And then because you're so fixated, the sculpture is literally walking you through time,
Mm,
like music is,
yeah.
but we're all present in it because I don't record any of my live performances to sell. I haven't released, Plays was the first album-ish
Right.
I 2004.
Yeah.
My first album in 2004, after I made it, I realized that was when I realized I wasn't a musician, and I made this distinction.
Mm,
Um, and decided, because I'm not a musician, I don't need to do the musician's stroll into the studio and making an album. Like that's like what people do.
mm,
Learn an instrument, they play in a band, they make a song, they go into a studio, they make a
right.
CD, give it to you, and that's it.
Right.
That's the transaction. The
Yeah.
song is done. And that is not, to me, a creative process that I find conducive with who I am as a
Mm,
person. So for me, after that happened, I made the declaration that I was never going to make albums again, because I'm a sound artist, not a musician. And that really pissed off a lot of people. But now, I want to say 15 years
yeah.
later,
15.
my album is now, I believe, available on Discogs for $200.
It's an artwork in and of itself. You know, that's the object, whether it's a physical version that becomes a rarity or sought after by the audiophiles, but it's not any less of a object by hearing it on Spotify. I think that's what's the beauty of it.
Yeah, it's how people want to interact with it, and then I kind of consider myself an instigator.
Mhm.
I sort of leave it there and make the alarmist statement, and then I run,
Right.
and then I just sit there and just watch everybody do what they do with it. And normally they all get pissed off and freak out, and I learn to move on, or
Well,
depends how people want to absorb the work.
right.
But by the end of the performances, ultimately what you're walking away with, also the social aspect of it is I always invite everyone to sit right next to me on stage.
True. I noticed that.
So I've now also broken the barrier of stage performance practice of art, you know, artist is genius, audience is other.
Right.
Is other cannot participate with artist on stage. And
Hierarchy, all that. Yeah.
because I don't believe in good or bad.
Mm.
So I think the idea of good and bad is from the 20th century. So for me to also think like I am this thing and you are lower than that is it that they don't also work.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't not believe in good and bad, but think you're the ultimate source of something.
Right.
So you really have to like always keep your ego in check, especially in this scene, because it's so quick to lose sight of what really matters. And so that was when I decided to pull people on stage, because it puts me really in, you know, because then everyone's right there.
Yeah.
And some people want to see,
Yeah, of course.
especially the boys.
Of
They
course.
wanna
Of course. The
know
gearheads.
the gearheads. And so normally when there's someone that gives me shade or someone that's really excited, just depends, like I'll
Yeah.
have them right next to me. Normally if they're really hating me, I'll let them sit right next to me.
Of course. Well, that's always like, I feel like with performance as yours, where my students more definitely haven't seen live, but I'll describe what I have seen live, because remember our month-long week of shows in public assembly in Williamsburg. You were performing at a few of them, and I was doing sound or something, but was very close to you and able to see, to try to describe for my students here, if you can imagine a visual collage made of records, in the sense that there are pieces of things that have been put to create this pizza, this pizza of ingredients of tons of different samples of different records, put all on one rotating disc together to create one new thing, the pizza.
Yeah.
And you can see its layers. Sometimes it's thin crust, sometimes it's deep dish. But you know, you are a chef of sorts, and who wouldn't want to see what ingredients they're eating, or in this case, hearing, than by seeing it up close. So, I mean,
and it breaks this social barrier too, where they're walking in thinking they're going to be treated one way, and suddenly they're being treated in a completely opposite, more warm way. And that warmness creates a kind of intimacy where suddenly the performance is no longer about this pious, arty, you know, show. It's a sit down at a campfire, and everyone's kind of asking questions about stuff, and we're just having a chat. And then every now and then I'll play a set, or I'll play a piece. I'm like, okay, questions, comments, complaints, or concerns, you know. And then normally somebody will raise their hand and ask a question, and it becomes a dialogue. Sometimes if there's children, I normally have them start the show for me.
right. I've seen that too.
It's best with children and in these kinds of performance formats that they get their curiosity energy out first,
Mm-hmm.
get all the attention first.
Yeah.
And they'll sit down and be quiet afterwards because they'll feel like they did something great.
They got what they did. They got it.
Kids have never even touched a turntable. I'm sure a few of your students have never even seen a turntable, let alone touch one.
Yeah.
I lived with a hi-fi system that had a cassette player, a turntable, and a radio, you know. So I grew up touching this equipment. So I also think if children are in the room, it's really imperative that they actually have some time to associate with the equipment that young, because then if you see that mechanical spiral in your head, that connects a lot of new neurons as well.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
fantastic.
I'm sorry?
I said, that's fantastic. Yeah.
And then the other social aspect of it that I think is the most obvious is that when you come to a show like mine, a lot of people come there with certain expectations about what the person is supposed to look like for this.
Yeah.
And so if we already broke this down, it's a recital base, but with a turntable, but it's only one, and it's on a stage. Where else have you seen this kind of presentation before? Nowhere, really.
Right.
that's already like really curious. And then I walk on, and nobody ever thinks it's going to be someone like me.
Right. Right.
There's nobody else like me. Like,
Right.
still in the scene, there isn't a single like indigenous brown woman that uses her full name and
Yeah.
not a character, doesn't have like a personality, isn't a pop star, like is just an artist in these genres.
Right.
I feel like that in itself, my walking onto the stage, my Maria Chavez name in these textbooks under John's now, like,
Yeah.
this is my social practice. This is the statement that I'm making as far as being a 21st century artist is concerned.
Yeah.
I don't care what I look like. I know it's shocking to you. This is the work. I'm going to make you come sit next to me. If you hate it, tell me. We'll talk
Yeah.
about it. Love it, tell me. We'll talk about it. Either way, this is neutral. It's not meant to be good or bad. It just exists. The whole point of it is really so that we just exist together and have these two cues to bring us together. But if you want to look at it as a sonic performance, or if you want to see it or romanticize it how you want to based on your history of hearing and listening from when you were young, then you're going to assign it how you wish, which is
Right.
why some really hate it and some people really love it.
Right.
And I like them all. I think the haters are the best ones, and they're more lately. When that video went viral, that was crazy.
Which one? Which one?
The New Sounds one. I'll send you
Oh,
that.
yes. I remember that. You're gonna have to share that for the students too.
Yeah, that's a good one, I think.
But with the internet and haters abound everywhere. But like you said, this is a
Well, I understand the haters is what is my point. Like,
yeah,
if they don't like the work, if they think it's, like, they're like, some people are like, oh, look at the way she touches her needle. Like, that's so amateur. And it's like saying when a sculptor is sculpting, chiseling on marble, it's like,
yeah,
oh, he's not painting. That's not a painting. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it's not. It's a sculpture.
yeah,
And
exactly.
that's what they're saying. So for me, when I see the hate, it's really funny for me because I actually know where their thought process is,
Yeah.
and I understand where they're coming from. So because I understand and can kind of generalize their past history of their listening, especially if I can look at their pages and things, I can
Yeah.
ideas, then I can understand that is why they can't adapt to
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
People project. They project a lot of their own, you
A
know,
lot of-
things they don't understand, or things that they're maybe creatively insecure about themselves.
and you have a brown girl that's doing
Well,
something
yeah,
even better than what you were trying,
exactly.
then it really pisses people.
Of course. I think that is something that artists like yourselves will hopefully have some sort of, hopefully we can normalize that beyond, because, the entire history of recorded audio or electronic audio related, sound related playback performance, DJ, electroacoustic music, pop music, everything, audio engineering is a boys club. And it can be,
I mean, the only reason Picasso is because he was allowed to be.
right. Yeah.
You know, if we were all allowed to be what we wanted back then Picasso wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah, because there have been so many more interesting things from people that were otherwise feeling repressed.
Yeah, and we were also going through a century of so much evolution, philosophically and artistically, that it's just that these rich white guys just happen to be there.
Yeah.
That they started these. I mean, we kind of needed to come out because that was just the time of it.
Yeah.
And so then sort of were there, but
You were the
they
guy.
got because they were rich and they could.
Good timing. It's who you know. Exactly. So let's use this. Let's
change. It
Yeah.
started, and I think my presence and other presences in it is key to that change.
Absolutely. Let's use that as a sending note. What would you say then for, in this case specifically, my students being artists of Latinx descent, coming from Puerto Rico, but young artists aspiring in general, whether they be of Latin American descent or not, trying to work their way into this field, this very large field that, you know, you've covered a lot of in terms of sound, from engineering to DJing to installation work to sound design for visual media. How would you, what would you say to a young artist trying to dip their toes into something like that now?
I think it's similar to what I mentioned earlier, which is about being open to adapting. Don't be so loyal to your vision, because the world is not what it used to be,
Yeah.
and the vision is already out of date.
Hmm.
Mine is too,
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah.
Ours is. And so the other thing I would say is, however these industries survive, and however the creatives that survive with it are going to be glorified, I just hope you will be strong enough to not let that importance get in the way of the real purpose of your work. And I think that is really what I try to talk to students the most. I try to call out students that are only doing this because they like the way other people are treated and seen,
Mm.
because if that's what's driving you, you're not really making work for your creative truth.
Right.
You're making work to create a story about what you wish you could be. And if you're not going to walk in line with who you're really meant to be and what your talents truly are, and allowing those talents to evolve and cultivate into whatever it is that they can do to help change the world, then you are not participating in bettering the world. Because right now what the world needs the most is truth.
Mm.
The world needs the most is people that are so clear on their morals, on what they're trying to do. I was saying for this PS1 talk this past weekend,
Yeah.
there's a difference between creating a platform and creating a platform because you want to control it. And
Mm.
there are these two different people in both the art and music world, in any world that glorifies people. These people are attracted to it because they aren't capable of actually making real work. They're only capable of seeking out power.
Right.
And by seeking out power, they exploit others.
Right.
I am a victim of major exploitation that I'm working through right now, which you're aware of, Max.
Yeah.
And that the fact that these individuals see us as objects in the art world, um, in any world you decide to go into, just know, as a brown, Latin, whatever your background is, we are seen as objects of value,
Yeah.
and we need to watch out, because
Yeah.
these people will steal your life,
Yeah.
because they want so badly to have that story for themselves, and they will do whatever it takes to get that, and
Mm.
they will pretend to be your friend or to love you, or just so that they can be around it. And those people all flock together.
Yeah.
So it's you having to learn who you are within those people. And if you notice that you're actually flocking with these people that aren't really living their truth, then hopefully that'll give you a moment to stop and be like, well, what are my real talents? What am I actually really good at? And how is it that this can evolve, not necessarily where I'm being glorified with publicity and all these accolades, but where I'm really making a change and a better place for everybody, whoever you're interacting with directly.
Yeah.
I think what this virus is really showing us is that we're a global community, and every single person you touch, literally,
Yeah.
um, we're all dependent on each other. And I hope the students will really take this really seriously. Going into the art world, into the music world, not for the faint of heart. You need to protect yourself, and you need to realize, as people that are considered minorities, even though we're majority, um, we are, to people that can exploit and objectify we are treasures. And so we need to protect ourselves, kind of like poachers, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
We're the rhinos and the
Yep.
elephants. They're
Yeah.
just trying to get our tusks, and it's real. It's very real. And I just hope that not just creatively, but just socially as moral human beings, you know what your responsibility is, because you're not just trying to like, it's not just, oh, I like making music, I want to be famous. It's like, why do people need to hear your work?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important? Why is your voice valuable for a platform of 100 people? Why is your voice valuable for a platform of 1,000 and then 1,000,000? You know, you have to start local, so you have 10, then you have 20, and you build up. Now I'm in the thousands, the hundreds to thousands, you know, and so then now my idea is, how do I get to the millions platform? So now I'm thinking TV and developing TV shows and writing scripts and things.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to show you guys, you are creative. If you're already in this class with Max, you are already a creative person. So it doesn't have to just be audio. You can take everything that Max is teaching you and adapt it to anything, any medium you want. What he's really trying to show you guys is that pushing the envelope is the only way to survive in our world. And he's showing you all of the tools so that you can push the envelope for yourself and cultivate your work and become a good person for our society.
Thank you. I'm trying to get them to push these envelopes, because the envelope's in a new place every morning, you know?
I mean, you're in Puerto Rico now, man. They can't bring Max. They can take Max out of New York.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. I'll bring that energy anywhere I go. But now we're all in the Matrix now anyways, so.
But also just for the students to understand the difference. When I was growing up in Houston, my biggest issue with the DJ world was they didn't make their platform enough. Like, I didn't understand their platform and how to function.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got to New York, I didn't actually know how to promote or how to profit off of all of these tours and things that I was doing.
Right.
Until I got there, and then I started to learn. And so I think for the students to have access to your perspective, you have a direct line to what the industry actually looks like and how it functions. Because outside of New York and outside of LA, it doesn't, it's
Right.
a totally different system.
It's a beast. Those are some beast systems. Well, you know, for another day, I think we'll have to have a conversation about, you know, I think there needs to be a class dedicated to audio industry. You know,
Really.
beyond the technical artistic side, but the, you know, surviving, you know, like vocational side. But, you know, hopefully with this video, our little conversation, that, you know, students can see, you know, that starting in one place can bring you somewhere completely different, you know, within the course of a decade or two. But just in terms of, like you said, you know, finding your truth, living it, being true to yourself and your art form, because it might end up pushing you into, or pushing the field into, you know, new pastures. You know, you're on the cover of, you know, what's argued to be one of the most essential, you know, historical texts on experimental electronic music. You know, you're the cover girl. But, you know,
That's the cover I would get, but I'm proud of it.
hell yeah. I think that excuse me, dog. I think that it's important. I think that even something like that is incredibly important, because it shows people, and like you said, specifically shows, you know, Latin American girls, Latin American, you know, like more marginalized groups of folks in general, that, you know, it doesn't need to be a boys club. It doesn't need to be a clique in whatever art field you end up.
Find yourself making a click.
Yeah, right. Snap out of it. That's fantastic. Let's end it on that. That's That's amazing. Maria, thank you from the bottom of my heart. My students thank you, and if they don't, I'll make them.
I hope it was okay. I hope it was
It was
helpful.
fantastic. It was fantastic. No, this was great. We really appreciate you taking this time. You know, this was a great conversation for me as an artist. Not, you know, like you said too, you're constantly evolving. You know, we should never stop being students.
Yeah, I'm
So
going to be like I feel like I've reached my limit with what I can do. I can still make installations like now. I want to do this canyon and
mhm.
work with national parks and stuff, but there's still something inside that's like, well, how much bigger can it get? And it's like, oh, TV's pretty big. So
Yeah,
just don't hold yourself back. Is my point. Don't
don't
just look at it as something.
constantly look for new things to do while sticking to your, you know, without having to fall in line with what a bunch of people who are, you know, to be fake, if you have any inkling of them not being real and being, just because they're successful doesn't mean that they have artistic ideas to back it up. So we should always, as artists, never aspire necessarily to be just a famous.
Yeah, to emulate a success, I
Right,
think
right.
is the problem. It's not about emulating success. It's about creating creative voices
Mm.
that help produce more work that the general public can continue to have their imagination exercised so that we as a society can evolve.
Damn, that's it. That's it right there. Thank
That's
you, Maria. That's the one. That's the quote that we end on. Thank you so much, Maria. Be
Thank
healthy. Be healthy. Be
one more year to go. Wish me luck.
yes. Well, I was saying be healthy like everyone should be healthy right now, but you in particular be extra healthy.
Yeah, no, I am. Thankfully, my wound is all healed up, so I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. I
Fantastic.
did my surgery before all this went.
Yeah, you were indoors resting no matter what before this happened, so now people are catching on your wave.
Yeah. Just don't lose hope, guys. Just focus on making as much work as you can. We're gonna get through this, I promise.
I'm gonna
And if
get
you
through
have
it.
any questions individually, feel free to get in touch. I'm more than happy to help with any.
I'll be sure to give the link to your website and all that in the video description and for the classroom. And I will also include in this video, probably throughout our conversation, I'll put in videos of some performances that you'll curate for us. So
Yeah,
it's
I have
not me,
a whole bunch
not
of
me
video
first.
samples for you guys to watch. So
Thank you so much, Maria.
thank you, Max. Thanks, guys.
All right, we will see you soon. Next time, we'll see you in Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Yes, that's what we're doing. All right, be well. I'll see you
Bye.
soon.
Thanks, Max.
See
Bye.
ya. Mwah. Bye.